The front door clicked shut with a softness that felt obscenely loud in the pre-dawn stillness of our home. It was a sound I'd heard countless times before, the conclusion to her rare late nights out with colleagues or old friends, usually followed by the familiar shuffle of keys being dropped in the bowl, the sigh of relief at being home, the quiet patting of bare feet on hardwood as she sought the comfort of our bed. This time it was different. This click wasn't a period at the end of the sentence. It was the ominous first note of a discordant symphony tearing apart the fabric of our shared life. She'd gone to a party the night before, a work function she described as tedious but necessary, brushing aside my casual offer to accompany her with a wave of her hand and a light, "Oh, it'll be boring suits talking shop, darling. You'd hate it. I'll be home by midnight." Midnight had come and gone, swallowed by the thick silence of the empty house. 1 a.m., 2, 3. My calls went unanswered, ringing out into a void that felt increasingly like a deliberate snub. Sleep was impossible, replaced by a gnawing anxiety that curdled into something colder, harder, with each passing hour marked by the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Now, as the first gray fingers of dawn smudged the horizon outside the window, she was finally home. I lay rigid in our bed, feigning sleep, my back to the door, every nerve ending screamingly awake, attuned to her presence like a seismograph registering an earthquake. The air shifted, carried with it the faintest trace of her usual perfume, almost entirely obliterated by a cacophony of other scents. Stale cigarette smoke clinging stubbornly to fabric, the sharp, acrid tang of spilled alcohol, something vaguely sweet and floral I couldn't identify, and beneath it all, a distinct, unsettlingly masculine musk, a cologne that wasn't mine. It wasn't the scent of a crowded room. It was the intimate, clinging odor of proximity, of bodies pressed close in dimly lit spaces, perhaps even closer. It invaded my nostrils, a physical assault that churned my stomach. Her footsteps were uncharacteristically heavy, dragging slightly, lacking their usual grace. She moved through the living room, past the kitchen, down the hall towards our bedroom door, a phantom trailing the ghost of the night behind her. The silence was profound, oppressive, thick with the weight of everything she wasn't saying, everything she'd done while I lay here, foolishly trusting, foolishly waiting. She paused outside our bedroom door. I could feel her hesitation radiating through the wood, a palpable wave of what? Guilt? Exhaustion? The simple awkwardness of returning so late? Or the terrifying weight of carrying a secret too large to bring into the sanctum of our shared space? The handle turned slowly, almost reluctantly, and the door creaked open. She didn't come in immediately. She stood there, a silhouette against the dim light from the hallway, breathing softly. I kept my eyes shut, my breathing deliberately slow and even, playing my part in this grotesque charade. The scent intensified, filling the room, a miasma of betrayal. Finally, she stepped inside, closing the door with exaggerated care, as if afraid the sound might shatter something irreplaceable. Her movements were furtive, those of an intruder, not a wife returning to her own bed. I heard the soft rustle of clothes being shed, not tossed playfully onto a chair as was her habit, but dropped carelessly, heavily, onto the floor. The mattress dipped beside me as she slid under the covers, careful not to touch me, lying stiffly on her back, staring at the ceiling I couldn't see but could feel her gaze burning into. The space between us, usually negligible, a warm bridge of intimacy, now felt like a chasm filled with ice water. She smelled of the night, of strangers, of a world she'd chosen to inhabit without me, and the scent was a violation. Sleep, for either of us, was impossible. I lay there, paralyzed by a torrent of thoughts and images my mind conjured with cruel precision. The party, whatever it truly was, transformed in my imagination from a dull corporate gathering into a pulsating, shadowy den of illicit connection. I pictured her laughing, head thrown back, eyes bright with a spark I hadn't ignited in months. I saw her leaning close to hear someone speak over the music, a hand resting lightly, perhaps possessively, on her arm. I imagined the fleeting touches, the loaded glances, the unspoken promises exchanged in the smoky half-light. And then, inevitably, the culmination. Hands that weren't mine exploring the familiar curves of her body. Lips that weren't mine claiming hers. Whispered words meant for another man's ears. The intimacy we shared, the sacred language of our marriage, felt suddenly cheapened, profaned by the phantom sensations evoked by that clinging alien musk. The coldness radiating from her side of the bed was absolute, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance that had opened up like a fault line in the few short hours she'd been gone. She was physically present, but the woman who left yesterday evening had not returned. In her place lay a stranger, radiating secrets and the undeniable aura of infidelity. Morning arrived with cruel indifference, sunlight slicing through the blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, highlighting the utter normalcy of our bedroom that now felt like a stage set for a tragedy. She was already awake, lying perfectly still, eyes open but vacant, fixed on some invisible point on the ceiling. She hadn't moved all night. The scent of the party had faded slightly, mingling now with the stale air of our shared shame and unspoken dread. But the essence of it, that intrusive masculine note, still lingered faintly, a stubborn accusation. I turned slowly, finally facing her. Her eyes flickered towards mine for a fraction of a second, a fleeting, panic glance like a trapped animal's, before skittering away, fixing resolutely back on the ceiling. There was no greeting, no soft good morning, no reaching out, just that shuttered look, the deliberate avoidance of my gaze. Her face, usually so expressive, was a mask of pale exhaustion, but beneath the tiredness, etched into the tightness around her mouth and the shadows beneath her eyes, was a profound guilt. It wasn't the guilt of staying out too late. It was a heavy, soul-crushing guilt of profound transgression. She didn't need to speak. Her eyes, her posture, the very air around her screamed confession. I pushed myself up, the movement feeling leaden, every muscle protesting. I couldn't bear to lie beside her a moment longer. The silence was a living thing, choking me. I needed space, air distance from the suffocating weight of her presence, and the devastating knowledge settling into my bones. I swung my legs out of bed, my feet hitting the cool floor. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge my departure. As I walked toward the bathroom, my gaze snagged on the clothes she discarded. The little black dress she'd chosen, the one I'd always loved on her, lay in a crumpled heap, looking cheap and tawdry in the harsh morning light. A single, sheer stocking was draped over the arm of a chair, a run snaking up the back like a jagged scar. But it was the bra that stopped me cold. Not the sensible, comfortable one she usually wore, but a scrap of lace and silk I'd never seen before, a deep crimson like congealed blood, tangled carelessly with her dress. It was exotic, overtly sexual, something purchased not for me, but for the gaze of another. The sight of it, so blatant, so alien in our familiar space, was a physical blow. It wasn't just underwear. It was a flag planted on territory I thought was mine, undeniable proof of intent, of preparation, of a deliberate journey toward betrayal. The carefully constructed dam of denial I'd been frantically shoring up all night finally burst under the weight of that crimson lace. In the sterile brightness of the bathroom, the full impact hit me. Leaning heavily on the cool porcelain sink, I stared at my reflection. The face that looked back was haggard, eyes red-rimmed and haunted, skin pale and waxy. I looked like a man who had witnessed his own death. The details of the previous hours crystallized with horrifying clarity. The uncharacteristic secrecy about the party's nature, the dismissive refusal of my company, the unexplained, protracted absence, the deafening silence when I called, the heavy, scent-laden return, the furtive entry, the glacial distance in bed, the utter refusal to meet my eyes, and now, the damning evidence of the crimson bra, a deliberate choice made not for comfort or familiarity, but for allure, for someone else. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't overwork or stress. This was a calculated act of infidelity. She had crossed a line, not in a moment of drunken weakness perhaps, but with premeditation, wearing the armor of seduction meant for another man, the trust that formed the bedrock of our marriage, our shared history, the love I thought was unshakable. It had all been obliterated in a single night. The woman I married, the partner I cherished, had willingly walked into the arms of another, and the person who returned was a hollow shell carrying the indelible stain of that choice. The familiar contours of my life, the routines, the shared jokes, the plans of the future, they all crumbled into dust, meaningless now against the stark reality of her betrayal. The world hadn't just shifted, it had shattered, and I was standing amidst the irreparable wreckage, staring at the unrecognizable ruins of everything I believed in. The party hadn't just been an event she attended. It was a catalyst for an annihilation. She had returned, but we had ceased to exist. Nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The days that followed were a slow, excruciating autopsy of our relationship. We moved through the house like ghosts haunting the same space, orbiting each other with a careful, brittle distance. Words, when spoken, were functional, clipped, devoid of warmth or connection. Past assault. The bill came. I'll be late. The vibrant tapestry of shared language, the easy banter, the comfortable silences filled with mutual understanding, all ripped away, leaving only a barren, echoing void. Her avoidance became an art form. She'd rise early or linger late, minimizing the moments we were alone together. When forced into proximity, her eyes remained resolutely averted, fixed on tasks on the floor, anywhere but on my face. The guilt that had been etched on her features that first morning hardened into a defensive wall, a brittle shell she retreated behind. Any attempt I made, however tentative, to breach the silence, to demand an explanation, was met not with denial or confession, but with a steely, impenetrable silence or curt, "I don't want to talk about it." It wasn't denial. It was a refusal to engage, to acknowledge the monstrous things she'd done. It was cowardice dressed in stoicism. I became a detective in my own home, haunted and hyper-observant, searching for clues in the wreckage, torturing myself with the evidence. I noticed a sudden, almost obsessive cleaning of her phone screen, the way she angled away from me with a swift, practiced motion whenever a notification chimed. I saw the new, guarded softness in her eyes when she did look at her screen, a fleeting expression that never surfaced for me anymore. The vibrant energy she used to bring home, even from mundane days, was gone, replaced by a profound weariness, a deep-seated sadness that seemed to emanate from her core. Yet paradoxically, there was also a new, unsettling detachment, a coolness in her touch when accidental contact occurred, as if my skin repelled hers. She stopped initiating any form of intimacy, recoiling subtly if my hand brushed hers. The casual affection that had been the glue of our daily life, the good-night kiss, the hand on the shoulder, the shared laughter, vanished, leaving a chilling absence. Our bed became a desolate no-man's land, a vast expanse of cold sheets separating two solitary islands of despair. She slept curled tightly on her side, facing away, the line of her back an unyielding barrier. The scent of that other cologne had faded, but its ghost lingered in my memory, poisoning the familiar scent of our home. Of her, the worst part wasn't the anger, though that simmered beneath the surface, a corrosive acid. It wasn't even the suffocating grief for the life we'd lost. It was a profound, soul-crushing sense of erasure. Who was the man she'd been with? What had he offered that I hadn't? What flaw in me, what lack, had driven her into his arms? My mind became a torturous loop of self-doubt and agonizing comparisons. Every perceived failing, every argument, every moment I'd been distracted or stressed was dredged up and examined under the harsh light of betrayal, reinterpreted as a reason, an excuse for her actions. My confidence, my sense of self-worth, lay in tatters. I felt like a discarded prop, no longer necessary for performance of her life. The foundation of my identity, husband, partner, lover, had been built on sand, and the tide had swept it all away, leaving me exposed and adrift. The woman I loved had looked at me, at us, and found it lacking enough to seek solace, passion, validation elsewhere. That knowledge was a wound that bled constantly, a dull, persistent ache that colored every waking moment and poisoned every thought. The party had been the spark, but the inferno it ignited consumed everything in its path. Trust, intimacy, security, love, and the very sense of who I was in relation to her. She had returned physically, but the essence of our marriage, the shared reality we'd built brick by brick over years, had been irrevocably destroyed. The house was the same, the furniture familiar, the routine superficially intact, but the life within those walls was unrecognizable, a chilling monument to a single night's catastrophic choice. Nothing was the same. Nothing could ever be the same again. The future stretched before me, not as a path to walk together, but as a desolate landscape I would have to navigate alone, forever marked by the morning she came home smelling of another man's life.